All right, so we got two pretty big pieces of news that have came out recently in regards to the gun ban in Canada. So I wanted to make a video about it. So the first one being out of the National Post here, saying new documents detail the guns is all illegally obtained, used by Canada's worst mass murderer. Now again, um, the fact that they haven't told us about the guns up until this point, I mean, that's very shady in and of itself. In that, let's just imagine that the guns were legally obtained, and it was basically any legally obtained any legally obtained gun. They would have been all over it. Like they would have been all over it, especially if it was an AR-15 or any semi-automatic rifle. They would have been all over it. But they probably would have told us within 24 hours. I would have bet money on it. Within 24 hours, the news would have broke, or at the very least, someone would have leaked it. Um, but we got to wait, what is it, 6 months, maybe, roughly, to get the list out. When, I mean, we've known they've all been illegally obtained. I think we knew that fairly early on in the process. We just didn't know which ones they were. Now we have it confirmed. It was a Colt law enforcement carbine. So again, pretty basically an AR-15. A Ruger Mini 14, a Glock pistol, and a Ruger P98 pistol. So again, three restricted or would be restricted guns in Canada, one non-restricted, although um, the Colt law enforcement carbine and the Ruger Mini 14 are both now prohibited. And again, the pistols still would still be restricted. So the first thing to point out here, again, they're all illegally obtained. So let's read about it here. Gabriel Wortman, the Nova Scotia man who murdered 22 people in April, was heavily armed with two semi-automatic rifles, two pistols, and special ammunition boxes designed to carry extra bullets. Okay, that's just a fancy word for magazines. Newly obtained documents also reveal all of the weapons were illegally obtained, three of them smuggled across the U.S. border. The other one, I think he stole from a former associate or something along those lines. The details are contained in a briefing note given to the Prime Minister just days after the shooting. The note reveals how the full horror of Wortman's shooting spree, which went on for 13 hours across a wide swath of northern Nova Scotia, ending when he was shot and killed by an RCMP officer at a gas station. Wortman impersonated an RCMP officer throughout the evening, driving a replica RCMP cruiser and wearing police uniform. In addition to the weapons he used, Wortman was also found with the service pistol of RCMP Constable Heidi Stevenson, who was killed in an earlier shootout. Wortman was killed by another RCMP officer in the morning of April 9th, a full 13 hours after the shooting began. The shooting was the worst mass shooting in Canadian history. The briefing note of the Prime Minister obtained through access to information shows Wortman had a Colt law enforcement carbine, a semi-automatic weapon similar to the rifles issued to RCMP officers. He was also carrying a Ruger Mini 14, a semi-automatic rifle that was also used during the Montreal massacre. Both weapons were banned by the Liberals in May. According to a briefing memo, the Colt was sourced to a California gun shop and was illegally smuggled into Canada. The Mini 14 was purchased legally in Canada, but is unlikely it was bought by Wortman, who did not have a firearms license. So maybe that was the one he stole. I don't know. I mean, either way, he didn't get it legally because he didn't have a firearms license. So, nonetheless, Wortman was also carrying two additional pistols, a Glock GmbH semi-automatic pistol and a Ruger P98, which both were smuggled in from Maine. Matt Hipwell, president of Wolverine Supplies of Manitoba Firearms Store, said three of the weapons Wortman used, the pistols and the Colt carbine, were restricted firearms at the time of the shooting, and depending on the specific characteristics of the weapons, they might have been banned entry entirely into Canada. A restricted weapon, they would have required Wortman to. Okay, they're just going into a little bit more of the details. You can go check it out if you want. But the main gist of the story here that I wanted to talk about is Justin Trudeau knew pretty much from day one, that they were all illegally obtained, and yet they went along with the gun ban anyway. So again, like I said before, I'll say again, this has nothing to do with public safety. This has nothing to do with saving lives or any of that garbage. This is entirely an ideological ban, right? It is entirely a ideological ban. This has nothing to do with public safety. This has nothing to do with saving lives or any of that garbage. And again, speaking of that, From the CCFR, in a Canada-wide press release, the National Police Federation has signaled their opposition to the sweeping May 1st gun ban and highlighted what resources are needed to combat crime and violence. The NPF confirms the gun ban targets the wrong people. Again, this is something we've known for a long time. The vast majority of police officers are well aware that the vast majority of crimes committed involving firearms, the person using said guns didn't have a firearms license, or I mean, of the ones who do, you're already breaking a ton of laws. Like, let's say you even have your restricted PAL, you have your ATT, you have all that stuff. It's all good to go. If you were carrying a loaded, even unloaded, but regardless, out in public, that's already mandatory minimum 6 months in jail, I believe, plus all of the other charges that would come along with that, right? So again, like, why in the world are we not worried about enforcing the existing laws? Like, the big problem, and the reason why I don't think crime is spiking and through the roof like a lot of people would have you think, but the reason why crime is still becoming an issue is that we're focused entirely on the wrong people, right? Like, these gang members and criminals can run free in Toronto. They get arrested with illegally obtained guns, no license whatsoever, and they get out on bail, no problem, so they can go shoot up places again. But if we're worried about dealing with duck hunters or stuff like that. We're worried about a guy who wants to use a gun for self-defense because crime is an issue in rural areas, specifically like Alberta, Saskatchewan, and whatnot. We're worried about going after those people, right? Because they're just um, you know innocent victims, right? They're innocent victims that are not doing anything whatsoever to threaten public safety, right? Not doing anything whatsoever, but these criminals we're not going after. Now, again, what is the government's motivation for this? This is something that people probably would be thinking, and that, if the government is so wrong about it, what is their motivation? And well, number one, um, many of these people are just incredibly ignorant. Like, you talk to the average person who wants to ban the guns, they have no idea whatsoever what they're talking about. They probably couldn't even name one make and model of any gun whatsoever. Like, just imagine if I was, I think we should place more restrictions on cars. Like, can you name a specific car? Well, Ford, like, that's what they would do. They would AR-15. Like, again, it's just pure insanity. So again, the everyday person who supports gun control, they're people that are very easy to mislead. They're people that are very naive, and they genuinely believe the lies that, oh, the states has a high murder rate because of their lax gun control, when in reality it has very little, if anything, to do with that. And Canada has a lower murder rate because of our gun control, when in reality we've always had a lower murder rate than the states. It has nothing to do with gun control. So that's, I think, the reason why the everyday person believes in gun control, because they're naive enough to believe whatever the news tells them and do no research whatsoever. Because if they did do research, within 5 minutes, I could completely debunk, and again, I've made videos about it, the idea that Canada has a lower murder rate because of our gun control, and the States has a higher murder rate because of their gun control. I mean, just spending 30 seconds on the topic, I mean, if you look back prior to Canada's gun control, number one, it was already trending down. And number two, the murder rate has been pretty steady in Canada for the last 20 years. It's been pretty steady. I mean, there was this, um, actually, slightly after the ban, I think it even went up a little bit. But again, if you look back in Canada, our murder rate has always been lower than the states. Like, always, the states murder rate peaked in like the 80s and the early 90s. But then, I mean, you look at the amount of guns then and the amount of guns now, it's more than doubled, right? It's more than doubled. The amount of constitutional carry states has more than doubled as well. So again, the amount of guns in the states has more than doubled in the last 25 years. The amount of constitutional carry states has more than doubled, but yet the murder rate has been cut in half. So again, there's many other things I could bring up, but that's basically in a nutshell why it has nothing to do with that. But um, Nonetheless, getting back to it, I mean, I covered why the average person supports this, but why do the politicians support it? The politicians support it because they don't like freedom, right? They don't like freedom. They want to push socialism. They want to push for big government. And what's the only thing that can stand in the way of a big, authoritarian government or a creepingly authoritarian government? It's, guns, right? Because if the citizenry is as armed as the government is, or even close to it, it's very easy to stand up against this kind of stuff. So I think that's the main reason. The other reason too is that um, it's entirely, I think, emotionally based as well. Like the people that want this kind of stuff, it's entirely emotionally based. Like, and again, they don't care about the facts, too. They don't care about the facts because let's just say you do agree with gun control, right? You want gun control. You think that they all should be banned, or at the very least, you support more restrictions. Then why in the world would they hear that all of the guns were illegally obtained and the first thing they think of is more gun control? Because the big problem, one of the many problems, because there's endless amounts, but I think something that needs to be pointed out is that why in the world would you hear, okay, all of the guns were illegally obtained, and the first thing you think of is, oh, if we just push this ban, then that would have saved lives? Because the idea behind this ban is what they're implying is that if we just ban all semi-automatics, or at the very least the ones they did ban, and if we ban handguns, then this crime wouldn't have happened, right? It wouldn't have happened, and not only that, we're going to reduce the murder rates. But the reality is that's not true. That's not true because they were all illegally obtained. The vast majority of guns used in crimes in Canada are illegally obtained. So we know, and this is, I think, one of the many reasons why the Police Federation has said that, because they know and we know that the vast majority of guns used in crimes are illegally obtained. So if you actually care about reducing gun crime, then I think we need two main things need to be done. Number one, we need to strengthen border security, which again, I don't think we're ever going to get to the point to where we can cut this down a significant amount, because again, we have a massive border, and it's impossible to we would have to spend a fortune to actually, I think, cut out a big chunk of it. But I do think we can have reasonable, do some more reasonable things that would reduce it a little bit. Number two, we have to start actually going after the criminals. This is a big problem too, that you have these people that are robbing people, that are committing these crimes and getting away with slaps on the wrist, or like slaps on the wrist. It's very funny. We have people who support throwing people in jail for violating these stupid lockdown restrictions. But again, God forbid we throw someone in jail for having a legally obtained handgun out in public. Like again, it's just absolute insanity. Like it's absolute insanity. So anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. So if you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out those links below. Follow me on those other platforms. If you want to donate, you can do that as well. But at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned for more.